So to start off with, I'm going to load it up into Photoshop. Double click on the layer so I can actually start to adjust it. And the first thing I like to do is crop the image. Because it's a portrait, I just want to capture a lot of the face as opposed to, the clothing. So if I select that, can go Control C, File, New, Clipboard, yep, create that, and then Control V. I've just got what I want to paint essentially. And then we go double click on the background. We can delete the one below it. We don't need that. Now the next little thing I like to do is we need to get rid of the background. So let's go get our path tool. And for that, I'm just going to do it fairly roughly, trying to capture as much of the hair as I can, but not all these wispy strands. You don't need all of that, because what you'll find is when you even look at a stencil, most of the time your eye will actually be drawn to like the detail in the eyes, the lips, mouth, those sorts of areas, as opposed to the tiny little hair strands. You can always go in and sort of add these with a pencil if you really want to, but it's kind of really unnecessary. Kind of defeats the purpose of just doing a nice simple stencil. So let's get as much of this in as we can. And there we go. I think that's enough. And then I click around the outside, close it off when it goes to the circle. And then I go over to the paths layer over here and then select Marchigans. And then we should just hit the delete key and bam, we've deleted our background, nice and simple, just like that. So now we go back over to our layers, and this is where the magic happens. So we go over to File, Scripts, and all the members will have access to this. So Wicked Stencil Script. Click on that, and now we can sort of start adjusting our parameters for all of our individual layers. So for this one, I want a fair amount of detail, so I'm going to reduce that down to about 1. I want this to be a 5-layer stencil, and I think I'm going to resize this by about 500 because this is already a really big image. So that might not be enough, but I'll leave that at 500. It should be okay. Change the markers to black so it's easier to see. And then we can start to actually adjust the levels of all our individual layers. So for this one, we can see a pretty clear separation of the black and all the other gray tones. So I think I can keep this fairly low. I'm going to keep this at about 30. And then because we've made this one 30, the first layer should also be 30, so they match up. And then for the highlights, this one here, that's going to be about, let's try 210. I usually find that works well. And then I like to spread the other numbers or the other layers in between them out evenly. So between 30 and 210, this one should be, I think, 90. So 60, 60 plus 90 is 150, and 210, yeah, perfect. So we got a 60 gap between all of our layers, and let's run that and see what that gives us. So look at that. Now the script is actually creating all of our individual layers for us and also adding the corner markers, which definitely saves a bit of time. So now that we've done that, we can close the script because it's done its magic. And what I like to do now is go click Control L. You can already see the black layer. We've got a fair bit of detail. It's got all of that little hair strands. We've got some nice little, eyelashes there. So it's definitely captured a good bit of detail in it. So let's see what else we get in our other layers. So I like to hit Control L for levels and change this to a fairly dark gray for our first layer, and then slowly work through all the layers, adjusting them to how I'd be painting them with spray paint. So this will be like my 75% gray, and then this will probably be like a 50%. And then lastly, the highlights. I think I got too much highlights in there, I think. That area is way too big. I'd like that to be way smaller, I think. I mean, it's got some good areas in the eyes. You almost want one more layer, actually, to be honest. And that is just perfect. So, yeah, this one is a 6-layer now. And I think it looks awesome. It just sort of fills in that huge gray space on the forehead. So it evens everything out a little bit. We got a little bit of highlight in some other areas too, which also helps, like the tip of the nose. And in the eyes too, which is perfect. Alright, now that we're happy with all of our layers, and I think this looks really awesome, we go through and start cleaning them all up. So the first thing we do is go down to our bottom one. And because this will be our base, I usually like to fill in all of these details to simplify it. And the way we do that is we go back up to our top layer, which is our black. We go to select, color range, select the black, and then switch that layer off, select the bottom layer, grab our brush, hit I for the eyedropper tool so we can select that color, and then make our brush really huge and just fill all of that in at 100%. So then when you go back and deselect everything, you get a nice clean shape which you can use to create your base. So this layer will be the easiest to cut, the easiest to paint, and it sets everything up for the rest of our layers. So now we go up to our second layer, which will be the next darkest value of gray. And you can see already, just looking at the mouth and the nose, we'll definitely need a couple of bridges in this one. So let's go over how to do bridges. It's probably one of the most common questions I get. And the easiest way to do them, I find, is just to switch on the layer above it. See if there's actually an opportunity to hide it behind the color above, which in this instance we don't actually have the opportunity to do, because you can see there's no sort of lighter gray in that area. So in this one, what I think we should do is just be really sneaky, get the eraser tool, not the brush tool. Make sure you have that layer selected, make your brush really small, and just create a tiny little bridge through there. But you know, playing with the edges as well, trying to make it look really natural, like it's got the same sort of feeling as the rest of the edges around here. It looks a bit rough, so let's create a rough sort of bridge through here so it looks really intentional. Almost like it's part of the artwork and it's meant to be there. And then we'll just continue up the side here to connect that as well. So we got a bridge connecting the top lip and the shadow under the bottom lip as well in one go, just like that. So this bridge is holding all of this in place. I don't think that's going to be enough. So what else can we do? All right, now I think that's our highlights done. So now what we can do is create a new document, which will be the size that we're going to cut it out at, which will be A3, create. And then we go back to our stencils, select all of them, move them across to the new document. And it's just about the right size, which is awesome. Scale them down a little bit. All right, just like that. So all of our layers are pretty much done now. And what we can do is delete that background and then go through each of our layers and start to save them out. Switch off all the other layers. Select the one you want to save out and then export. All right, so layer 6 gray, save that. Yep. Then the next one, export, quick export, layer 5. All right, all our layers are saved out. So now what we can do is go over to our Cricut design space and start to cut them out. So when it comes to cutting the stencils, hand cutting is always the best. But if you're short on time like me, then a Cricut is a lifesaver. Once you've opened up your Cricut software and made your way through all these ads, then select New Project in the top right-hand corner, and then Upload from the left toolbar, which also brings up your upload area. Click Upload Image and start selecting your stencil layers. I always start with the quickest and easiest one, which is your base layer. Then add it to your canvas, and here what you want to do is make sure you set the dimensions correctly and copy these dimensions for each and all of your other layers too, so that way when you cut them out, all of your markers will line up perfectly. Then we go to cut it and set the material. I'll be using 220 GSM A3 board, as it cuts really well and gets great detail too and stays stiff enough to use like multiple times for multiple stencil artworks. stencils are done. Now it's time to have some fun and go paint. I'll be painting on a small little canvas today, and I always start with my background, so it's not really an afterthought. That way I always end up putting a little bit more thought into it, even if it's something really simple. Essentially, you just want to get enough weight on it so you get a nice sharp edge when you start painting down. One thing that took me a while to learn is putting the paint down in nice light layers. It's really easy to go way too heavy with the paint and go too thick, but if you put it down in nice light layers, you can also get a bit of extra texture, which can also add to the artwork. So, I mean, it's pretty much the same process for each layer. You just have to make sure that you line up all your markers nicely.